My name is Robin Mukherjee. I'm a student in the School of Philosophy and Economic Science. Quite a few years ago, when I was in my late 20s, I visited family from my father's side in India. We hired a minibus for a trip up to the wooded hills just outside Jamshedpur. There were cousins, aunts, uncles, friends, extended family, food, water, pets stuffed into every available crevice as we swerved slightly terrifyingly around precipitous bends in the road. Singing, yes, somebody had suggested we sing songs, and as the honourable visitor from a distant land, I was invited to go first. The only thing I could come up with in that moment was Hey Jude, because I knew it from beginning to end, at least I thought I did, and we did okay. I seem to recall some interesting Eastern harmonies in the closing coda. What they sung were songs written by the Bengali poet Rabindranath Tagore, one after another, each as delightfully, charmingly melodic as the last, a seemingly inexhaustible resource. The one I remember most was, if you forgive me, Ami Chini Go Chini Tumare, because they taught it to me, or tried to anyway, very patiently, I have to say, and I'm sure they sung it a lot better than that. I have lost count of how many recitals of Tagore I've heard since then, impromptu and formal, in apartments in Kolkata, houses in Delhi, the Purcell Room in London. Out comes a tabla, the harmonium, sometimes just the harmonium, and the singer begins, and it's enchanting every time. Sometimes the songs are familiar, but there are over 2,000 of them, so I doubt that I have or will ever have heard them all. Leonard Cohen, with his characteristic modesty, once said that if he knew where songs came from, he would go there more often. Wherever that is where Tagore lived his whole life. He was prolific. Along with the songs, he wrote plays, 40 plays, dance dramas, poetry, and within each of these categories, a dazzling variety of form and genre. He became a painter later in life, conjuring beautiful works. He was an educator, a philosopher. Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, said he had two gurus, Gandhi and Tagore. One of his poems provides the text of the Indian national anthem, another the Bangladeshi national anthem. In 1913, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Unlike Shakespeare, who is blessed with a scarcity of personal information, Tagore's life has been chronicled and critiqued to a level of detail that I shall blithely skip. Partly because I don't have much time, and partly because it doesn't really matter. He said himself, reflecting on his life on his 70th birthday, and I have a slide. I have, it is true, engaged myself in a series of activities, but the innermost me is not to be found in any of these. At the end of the journey, I'm able to see a little more clearly the orb of my life. Looking back, the only thing of which I feel certain is that I am a poet. However, to give some context to his work, there are some things one can usefully know. He was born to a prosperous family, the youngest of 14 children in Kolkata, West Bengal. His family was full of poets and singers, artists and intellectuals at a time of a cultural flourishing celebrated as the Bengali Renaissance. At the age of 17, he was sent to England to study law. It seems to be an affliction of the parents of people destined to become poets, to send them off to study law. Anyway, it didn't go so well, just as he hadn't done particularly well at school. For him, the educational system was more of a constraint than a liberation. His own vision for schooling came to fruition later with the foundation of Shanti Niketan, a school centered in the humanities and the arts, and a university, both of which prosper to this day as exemplars of how to learn and teach. And I have many relatives who went to Shanti Niketan and loved it, and came out super intelligent and educated, I can tell you. So the finer points of jurisprudence might have passed him by, but he soaked up the culture. Shakespeare, the Romantic poets, the great classical composers, and thanks to his host, whose daughters played the piano, Irish folk music. And all of this merged with his vivid imagination, his creative energy. But it also gave him a vision of the world with all its diversity and cultural identities as a single expression of the gift of life, an exploration beyond and above everything of the mystery of being. When he returned to India, he was given the job of looking after the family plantation. I said they were prosperous, and he did that well, and he wrote about it, poem after poem, pastoral poetry, obviously, but also deeply humane considerations of the human plight. There was suffering in the countryside, poverty and hardship, and Tagore considered it deeply. It made him a nationalist in a sense, it made him socially aware, it made him a lifelong campaigner for justice, and it made him into the poet that went back to England in 1912 with a small collection of verse he named Gitanjali, or Song Offerings. The manuscript came to the attention of W.B. Yates, who had it typed up and arranged readings. Yates said of its verses, "As the generations pass, travellers will hum them on the highway, and men rowing upon the rivers. Lovers, while they await one another, shall find in murmuring them this love of God, a magic gulf wherein their own more bitter passion may bathe and renew its youth. At every moment, the heart of this poet flows outward to these without derogation or condescension, for it has known that they will understand, and it has filled itself with the circumstance of their lives." Yates is also a great poet. Anyway, pretty soon, Gitanjali was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. At the award ceremony, it was said, "The Gitanjali is mysticism, but not a mysticism that, relinquishing personality, seeks to become absorbed in the all to a point of nothingness, but one that, with all the faculties of soul at highest pitch, eagerly sets forth to meet the living Father of all creation." What struck Yates, among other things, was not just the simple beauty of the verse, although the construction is complex and intricate, but that Tagore resolved a conundrum. You don't have to deny the world to celebrate the infinity that sustains it. So Tagore writes about a rice farmer sitting by the banks of a river, but the farmer and the verse itself is turned to the unlimited, searching for it, seeking to understand, accepting the failure to understand, searching again. For Yates, this was less than Bernard covering his eyes so as not to indulge in the beauty of a Swiss lake, and more the revelatory exaltations of St. Francis or William Blake. In his foreword to Gitanjali, Yates picks out, among other passages, this crystal clear, infinitely simple statement. "Entering my heart unbidden, even as one of the common crowd, unknown to me, my king, thou didst press the signet of eternity upon many a fleeting moment." The signet of eternity upon many a fleeting moment. Some commentators question why Tagore won the prize. Was it a political statement, some kind of cultural balancing act, diversification? Yates was in no doubt. He said, "These lyrics, which are in the original, my Indian friends tell me, full of subtlety of rhythm, of untranslatable delicacies of color, of metrical invention, display in their thought a world I have dreamed of all my life long. The work of a supreme culture, they yet appear as much the growth of the common soil as the grass and the rushes. A tradition where poetry and religion are the same thing has passed through the centuries, gathering from learned and unlearned metaphor and emotion, and carried back again to the multitude the thought of the scholar and of the noble." So I feel that now is probably a good time just to hear some of the verses. And I'll start with the opening of Gitanjali. "Thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure. This frail vessel thou emptiest again and again, and fillest it ever with fresh life. This little flute of a reed thou hast carried over hills and dales, and hast breathed through it melodies eternally new. At the immortal touch of thy hands, my little heart loses its limits in joy and gives birth to utterance ineffable. Thy infinite gifts come to me only on these very small hands of mine. Ages pass, and still thou pourest, and still there is room to fill." This is a poet writing about his poetry, and it is us speaking about ourselves. I think that is part of the immortal quality of his verse. Here's another. "The day is no more, the shadow is upon the earth. It is time that I go to the stream to fill my pitcher. The evening air is eager with the sad music of the water. Ah, it calls me out into the dusk. In the lonely lane there is no passer-by, the wind is up, the ripples are rampant in the river. I know not if I shall come back home. I know not whom I shall chance to meet. There at the fording in the little boat, the unknown man plays upon his lute. Thy gifts to us mortals fulfill all our needs, and yet run back to thee undiminished. I won't even try to explain this, because explanation only distances us from its import. But there are many motifs here which Tagore fills with meaning across his works. Water as abundance, life, spirit, the flow of creativity, transience. The river is here and not here, permanent and impermanent, and what indeed is the nature of either. And home, of course, the place of true belonging. The source of music as the source of all things, and the instrument through which the infinite finds expression in the finite, the lute, the flute, the poet, the human being. One commentator wrote that the poems of Gitanjali are the offerings of the finite to the infinite, and it reminds one of Romeo and Juliet. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite. And from one of the Upanishads, which Yates later translated, and this is his translation, perfect comes from perfect, take perfect from perfect, the remainder is perfect. For perfect, you could also read full, complete, infinite. Tagore had an unquenchable outflowing of creativity, and the more he gave, it would seem, the more he had to give. So it's no surprise, perhaps, that if one reads or hears anything of Rabindranath Sangeet, as his work is sometimes called, for instance, Ami Chinigo Chini Tamare, then the imagination is taken to a landscape rich in imagery, resonant with feeling, and in my case, in that case, and perhaps in every case, to a minibus careening along precipitous cliff edges, while the soul, if I can get a little grand here, soars beyond form to the inexpressible. Well, that's it. Thank you for your company. Enjoy the rest of the day. Philosophy Live resumes in September, so we have a summer break. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you in the autumn.